Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about extreme views and immigration in coding. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, what is your experience dealing with people who have extreme views on immigration within software development? And the short answer is that it depends on the perspective, but for the most part this is no different from dealing with a poorly, like a bad culture fit person, or if you're looking at it from the perspective of the person who's being subjugated to this sort of treatment, as looking at as gender discrimination or any other type of thing, right? Let me explain. So this was a question that I got on my comment section, and I promised that I would touch on this in a better way than I could in a comment, because it's such a big topic. Because the first thing that we need to ask ourselves is, okay, what do we mean by which perspective are we considering here? Because if we're talking about, how do you deal with people who basically are hostile towards immigrants? In general, like if we're going to talk about it from the perspective of you are a manager and you need to deal with this sort of thing, that's one perspective. And the other perspective is, oh, you are a person working within a company and you're being subjected to some type of discrimination for your nationality or something like that, this sort of thing, right? These are the two perspectives that I think make the most amount of sense. You can also, of course, also have the perspective of, oh, you are a person who is seeing that somebody is being subjected to this thing. But let's focus on these two things first and foremost. So if you are in the situation of, let's say for the sake of argument, that you are a manager and you're dealing with this sort of thing. Now, the likelihood that you will face this sort of problem in programming or like in IT in general is fairly low, because basically programming is a very international profession to begin with. It's a border crossing community. It's not isolated to a local environment mostly. It is something that is very organically has grown into something that completely crosses borders. As long as people can communicate with each other, and people share like all these libraries and all these tools from all kinds of people from all across the world, it's less of a problem, I would say, that people have extreme views on immigration within software development, or at least they might have the views that immigration is bad and so forth, but it's not so common that I see people feeling oppressed, or that people feel like they are subjugated to discrimination because that they are immigrants into a country and so forth. I mean, if you look at the really successful high-end IT companies, I mean, they have people from the entire globe. And so, I mean, even my company has people from the entire globe. It's very rare that you find like an IT company where you have a group of people who are hostile towards immigrants. Usually that's not the case. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that for the most part I think that you can feel very confident in that if you do find such a company, it's going to be a very rare occurrence. There are professions where it would be very normal. I'm very sorry to say. I'm not saying that this isn't happening. I'm just stating that there are other areas of the world or other professions where it would be normal for you to be discriminated, versus like what it is in IT, where it should be fairly rare that this happens. Now, gender discrimination is a much bigger thing in IT, where females usually feel, well, I'm not saying targeted, but female programmers definitely have a tougher time than just someone who is an immigrant or something like that, as this person was describing it that he himself described himself as. So with that said, the perspective of from the manager will usually be that, all right, you have some person who is mistreating another person, and if you have a good manager, or if you are a good manager, you should be the sort of person that can very quickly pick up that there are people here who aren't working so well together, or do you have some type of riot starter, a troublemaker? You can identify these people very quickly, usually as a manager, and this doesn't have to do just with immigrants, the immigration views. It can have to do with anything. This is the same thing you have with people who mistreat females or like women and so forth. It's very easy to find such a person. Usually they are the sort of person that they're usually very negative. They usually have whoever they touch, like whoever they interact with, they usually they have an air of negativity and passive aggressiveness and hostility, if you will. They're not. It's a hard thing to describe, but if you have a decent, just a normal level EQ, you will start seeing it very quickly. That usually people either don't want to deal with this person, or everybody is a little bit afraid of them, or like they're reluctant to talk to this person, and this person usually will speak their mind about some things, or maybe they're always quiet when you are around, because hey, you know, making sure that, I don't know what the English term for this is, but we have a term here in Sweden where they basically, you know, people adjust their behavior depending on, oh, a person of authority is in the room. Shit, now I need to be extra quiet and just, you know, keep to myself. As soon as that person leaves, they go back to being this like horrible person, basically. So as a manager, you treat this pretty much the same way as you treat anything. Like you might go, it depends on if, maybe you want to make a statement. I've seen many managers who want to do this, because things such as sexual harassment and gender discrimination and racism and stuff like that, these are politically and culture-wise sensitive topics. Some managers feel that they need to make a statement, and if they make a statement, usually what you will do is that you will address the issue in the same way you would with anybody who's a troublemaker. You will talk to them, you will give them warnings and so forth, and you will try to, if that doesn't work, you will give them some space from each other. You will try to put them in different teams and so forth, or you talk through the issues if that's at all possible. And the last step is, of course, that you fire the person who's causing the issue. But some also put it up at the company level that usually this is, as I said, very uncommon that you have this sort of issue, but when it does actually arise, some managers go really heavy on spreading awareness and trying to just mitigate it at the company level. So if you all of a sudden are pulled in as an employee into like sensitivity training or something like that, odds are that it may not be you necessarily who has caused the situation, but the management may have felt that there was some bad blood between some people at the company, and now they want the whole company to be involved in order to mitigate this. So this is one way that this can solve, and this is one answer to this question. The other perspective is that, okay, you are an employee in this company that is being subjugated to this sort of treatment. So usually there's two situations that can happen here. One part is that you have a company who is aware of the problem, and one part is that you are in an environment where they might not be aware of that there is an issue. They might not even be open to it, and that's the key thing that you need to feel here. So if you are being discriminated against, or, I mean, this is also hard. It's hard to tell sometimes if you're being discriminated against or because of your ethnicity or your nationality, or if it's something else. If you're unlucky, they're actually just going to tell you. I have never seen that happen, but some people are more blunt than others. If that is the case, then you need to figure out if you're going to get some traction on bringing this up with your superiors. Because, as I said, there's two situations. That one situation is that you will have the backing of your manager or the backing of the company, like they are open to addressing this issue for you and like helping resolve the situation. And the other way of looking at it is that nobody's gonna, like, you're in a situation where nobody cares, or like they're not open to addressing this, and they're very, like, the company isn't really interested in dealing with it or so forth. If that is the situation, that's the absolute worst situation, then the only thing you can do is to apply the same tips I've given in other videos, and that is to either you create a contact surface between yourself and the person who's causing this, who's discriminating against you, that is as small as humanly possible. Like, you just determine the rules of engagement quickly and make sure that you interact as little as humanly possible, and just as little as possible if you want to deal with this. The other option is that you quit. Those are the only two options, because if you don't have the backing of the group around, like if it's not just one person who is allowing this sort of, or causing this sort of behavior, but rather it's one person who is causing the behavior and a bunch of other people who are either indifferent or encouraging that sort of behavior, then you're alone in a sea of problems, and it's very likely that this is not going to be worth it for you. But as I said, luckily for you, this is not that common, so switching jobs should resolve the whole situation. On the other hand, if you actually have just one person who's causing the problem, and then you know that you can get the backing of the rest of the company from your managers and your coworkers, like they're all nice people, they're just not aware of it, because as you probably know, if they're not being subjected to this themselves, maybe they're all natives or like wherever, like they're from a group that they don't really face this sort of small everyday racism, or like, you get a glance here, someone takes extra long to do something, a comment there, like this passive aggressive, like, we're muttering shit under our breath. That's not normal for quite a lot of natives. And different groups who aren't faced with this sort of problem. So what you need to do is to go and talk to your manager and explain that I sense that there is some tension between, handle it in a graceful manner. Say that it's probably, maybe it's just you, but it feels like there's a bit of tension between you and this other person here. So maybe you can ask the manager, can you just pull some strings? Or maybe if this continues, could you be switched to another team or like something like that? Or can we address the situation? Just be transparent with your manager about this, and that will hopefully resolve the situation. So what I want you to take away from this is that usually extreme views on immigration is not so much of a problem in IT in comparison to other places where it would be very normal for you to pretty much wherever you go get someone at that job that has these sorts of views, right? In IT it's less of a problem. So if you do face that sort of thing and you're scared that this is the norm, don't be, because for most companies this is not the norm. It's such an international field that most companies don't have this as a normal thing. If it does happen, you have two options. There's two views to it. If you're a manager that is dealing with it, you deal with it in pretty much the same way you deal with any misbehaving employee, but you can also kick it up one notch because of how sensitive this sort of topic is, and you don't want to spread it, and create awareness courses and stuff like that. And as an employee, you should be aware of that. If a company starts doing like awareness courses and like all of these sorts of things, it might actually be that you have an issue of this nature within your company. It may not have been you who caused it, but someone at that company has scared your managers, or maybe they're just doing it as a preemptive thing. The second perspective is that you are the employee and you're being discriminated against. Then there's two options usually as well. Either the company is unwilling or unaware, like they don't acknowledge that this is a problem, or they will acknowledge that this is a problem. If they don't acknowledge it, switch jobs usually, or try to isolate yourself as much as possible from the person who's causing the problem, because usually it's not an entire company of people who have the same extreme views. It's usually one or two people that is driving everything and everybody else is just kind of quietly allowing it to happen. If that is the case, then you can isolate yourself from the people who are driving the problem and then just mingle with the people who are apathetic bystanders, or like they don't actually fight for you, if that makes sense. And the second perspective is that the people actually don't condone this sort of behavior, and the problem is simply that they're not aware of that it is an issue. Because remember, some people will not act even though they are aware that they will like just take a step back because they don't want to get involved. But some people are just unaware of the sort of small little things that someone who is an immigrant or someone who has a specific skin color and so forth can get faced with. And it doesn't have to, some people think that racism, and they think about prejudice as being this overt thing where people stand on the street and shout out all this sort of thing that they dislike about you. But it's not that usually. It's usually these small little things, a comment there, passive aggressiveness there, things take a little bit longer whenever you're, like when they do something for you, these sort of tiny small things that causes this tension. And that tension is very hard sometimes to spot, so you need to make people aware of it. That's at least how I believe that you should handle this. Have a great day.